To the Point with your host, News Channel 5's Kelly Dunn.
Good morning. This could be a significant week in Congress. There's talk of shutting down the government, keeping only essential services operating. My guest to talk about that and other top issues is Congressman Ted Deutch. He is a Democrat from Boca Raton, representing the 19th District, which stretches from West Palm Beach south to include parts of Broward County. Thank you so much, Congressman, for your time today.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks, Kelly.
Let's get to the point. Democrats and Republicans are more than $60 billion apart in their spending plans, and Friday's the deadlines. What are the odds that they're going to get this worked out?
Well, I think that we have to get something worked out so that we can continue to operate the government. The last time that the Republicans shut down the government, we saw all sorts of devastating effects. Hundreds of thousands of people didn't get their Social Security checks. Medicare was held up, veterans benefits, and FBI and DEA investigations were held up. We can't afford to let that happen. I hope that the Republicans won't shut the government down this time.
If this can't be worked out, I mean, are voters going to get to the point and say, okay, we're fed up with all of you? I mean, is that a concern?
Well, I think what the voters want us to do is to move forward in a responsible way so that we can both reduce the deficit and make the investments necessary to create jobs. That focus on jobs is unfortunately what's been missing from House leadership these past couple of weeks.
Let's talk about the high-speed rail. You were an advocate of it when you were in the state Senate. Do you think Governor Rick Scott's decision to reject the federal money was the right thing?
No. Look, the governor says he wants to run the state like a business. And I don't know of any business that would turn down $2.5 billion in startup capital. That's what this is. This was an investment in Florida's future. It was an investment supported by business leaders, by labor leaders. It's exactly the kind of thing necessary for us to grow the economy. I met this week with the South Florida Manufacturers Association. They understand that if we're going to expand trade, if we're going to expand our business opportunities, we need to invest in infrastructure. This is, I think, a terrible signal that it sends to the entire state.
But at a time when we're so desperately in the hole and the economy is so tough right now, I mean, it's still the right thing to do?
Exactly, because things are so tough, tens of thousands of jobs would have been created with high-speed rail in Florida. Instead, this is not money that's going to be used to reduce the deficit. This is money that's going to wind up going to New York or to Minnesota or to another state that's going to benefit and have the thousands of jobs created there instead of right here in Florida where we need them.
Let's now move on and talk about, you're on the Middle East Subcommittee in the House. We're going to roll a little bit of video. The news coming out of Libya, of course, is that protesters are being attacked by the military. Should the United States be doing more to support these protesters in Libya?
Well, it's incredibly disturbing what's happening in Libya right now. We don't know exactly what's happening because, with the exception of a few very brave journalists, we're not getting the information. There are reports that now in excess of 1,000 people have been slaughtered by Gaddafi and the mercenaries that he's brought in. We need to do everything we can to make sure that democracy moves forward in that country and that the rantings of Gaddafi are recognized. We need to take action. We need to think about sanctions and move forward with those. And we also need to make sure that Libya is kicked off of the Human Rights Council at the UN. Disgraceful that with what's going on there, they continue to hold that seat.
But when you're dealing with someone like Gaddafi, who, I mean, a lot of people are just saying has lost it. I mean, how do you even, I don't even know how you start repairing this situation when he is, a lot of people say he's crazy.
Right. Well, we have to, we have to take the action that we can to ensure that government moves in the direction toward democracy. And there are ways that we can do that. There's leverage that we have. We need to work with our allies from around the world to impose sanctions, to take a tough action, the tough action that's necessary in order to make sure that gets resolved correctly.
There's so many ripple effects from what's happening over, well, first we saw it in Egypt and now in Libya. How will it impact U.S.-Israeli relations?
Well, right now, the importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship is, I think, evident to everyone. It is more important than ever that we do everything we can to ensure the safety and security of our one true democratic ally in the region. We talk about that all the time, but in light of everything that's going on now in the region, we know just how important that is. We need to make sure that as Egypt moves forward, they recognize the importance of maintaining the peace agreement with Israel, and we need to make sure that they crack down on the Gaza border so that we don't see smuggling of arms and terrorists across into Gaza. All of it really calls out for a keen focus on the U.S.-Israel relationship and maintaining it.
Back here in the United States, President Obama's reform of the healthcare system is being challenged in the courts. Do you think it needs to be changed?
Well, like any big piece of legislation, there are going to be changes as it is enacted. We know that the provision that requires businesses to file 1099 forms, that provision is going to be changed. But there are very positive pieces of the legislation that are now in effect that ensure that people can remain on their parents' policies till they're 26, that does away with bans, discrimination based on pre-existing conditions. And for so many of the seniors who are watching this morning, that closes the donut hole. We need to keep what's good about it, even as we fix what needs to be corrected.
And you're hopeful that that will happen? You'll get enough of a plan that does benefit the majority of Americans.
My hope is that instead of the political theater of trying to repeal the law and the political, what is really just, I think, posturing, that instead that the Democrats and Republicans can work together, that Republican leadership is willing to engage in a way that will keep those parts that have done so much good already, even as we work to make other changes.
What are the biggest differences you've noticed since the Republicans have taken control of the House since January?
Well, what's interesting, what's really most interesting is throughout the entire campaign, all we heard, starting from the time that I got to Congress last April, was the Republicans saying, where are the jobs? And the continued focus throughout the election on the unemployment rate and all the things that needed to be done to help increase employment. Now, here we are, weeks into the new Congress, the 112th Congress, and leadership has yet to put forward any legislation that will help to create jobs. That's where the focus needs to be, and I hope that that's the direction we go.
What about the Tea Party? What are your thoughts on the Tea Party?
Well, I think if you look at the reckless budget that the House just passed, it's clear that the Tea Party drove some of the deepest cuts. And as I said, given the economy that we have, instead of cutting Pell Grants, which is what this budget does, we ought to be making investments to help people get education. Instead of cutting investments in infrastructure, which this continuing resolution does, we ought to be making the investments to help build our economy. We need to focus on the future. We can reduce the deficit, but we need to do it in a way that doesn't make drastic cuts to health care and services provided and education. We need to do it in a way that eliminates Pentagon boondoggles, and we need to look at special interests like the oil industry that continue to get $4 to $5 billion a year in subsidies. That's where we need to do it, and I think the Tea Party would agree that we ought to focus that direction as well.
Your neighboring colleague, Republican Allen West, gets a lot of attention in Washington. Even before he got to Washington, he was getting a lot of attention. What do you think of the job he's doing?
Listen, I think all of us have an obligation as members of Congress to work hard on behalf of our constituents and to do what we think is in the best interest of the people that we represent. On a local level, that means constituent service. That's something that we pride ourselves in, making sure people get the help that they need. Some members of Congress choose to speak out on some issues. Others choose to find their appropriate avenues to speak out. I continue to come back to the district every opportunity, like this week, where I've had meetings with a wide variety of business leaders and community activists to talk about what was wrong in this really reckless budget that just passed.
And when you're home so often, which is great, and in touch with your constituents, what are their biggest concerns right now? And have they changed, or is it still the same that you've been hearing for the last couple months?
Their concerns really are, in many ways, are no different than the concerns I heard last February before my primary election. People want this economy to continue to move forward. With unemployment in Florida 12%, close to 12%, we need to continue to make creating jobs a top priority. They're frustrated that at this point that's not been the priority of this Congress. And what they tell me is instead of using the budget debate to cut funding for Planned Parenthood and to eliminate the kind of funding that goes to provide cancer screenings and that goes to provide health care screenings, instead we ought to be focusing on creating jobs even as we reduce the deficit by eliminating some of these special interest subsidies.
Will there be enough unity within all of the members of Congress and everyone in Washington to get some of that done? Are you going to be able to tell your constituents that's what we went to Washington to do and we accomplished it?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
My hope is that all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will understand why shutting down the government is not a good idea, that Republican leadership will not permit its members to shut down the government. There's too much at stake, and that we can then move forward in a way to help create jobs and to help sustain economic growth. That's what's most important in Florida and around the country.
Congressman Ted Deutch, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Good luck, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you again.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Coming up in just a moment, our roundtable takes a look at some of the big political developments of the week. Time now for our political roundtable, and here